The email arrived at precisely 4:02 p.m., a sterile digital guillotine severing my daughter's joy from the rest of her childhood. It was from Mr. Harrison, the headmaster of Northwood Preparatory, a man whose smile was as expensive and hollow as the school's latest fundraising initiative. His words were a masterclass in condescending bureaucracy. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," it began, foregoing the warmth of my first name. "Following a careful review of recent events, the administration has made the difficult decision to recast the lead role for the winter performance. While we appreciate Lily's enthusiasm, her recent disruptive behaviour cannot be overlooked. This decision is final and non-negotiable. We trust you will support the school in this and help manage your daughter's expectations." He didn't ban her. He erased her. He didn't offer a conversation. He delivered a verdict. And in that cold, dismissive prose, he revealed his fatal flaw, the arrogant belief that he held all the power, that I was just another mother he could placate with corporate jargon. He had no idea he wasn't just ending my daughter's role in a school play. He was casting me in a new one, a role I was born to play. The director of his downfall. And now please stop the video and subscribe to our channel. To be able to keep making videos like this, we need to reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Thank you. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking patiently next to his typed name, a tiny digital heartbeat counting down the seconds of his career. The anger came first, a hot, white flash that made my ears ring. But then something else washed over me, something cool and familiar. It was the quiet click of a lock falling into place, the settling of a finely tuned machine preparing to do its work. Before I was a PTA mum, before my world revolved around bake sales and carpool schedules, I was Clara Thompson, senior forensic accountant for a firm that specialised in unwinding the tangled, fraudulent schemes of very powerful, very arrogant men. I spent 12 years learning that ego always leaves a trail. Men like Harrison believe they are architects of grand designs, but they are sloppy builders, leaving behind a mess of receipts, invoices, and digital footprints. I had put that life aside to build a different one, a softer one, for my daughter Lily. I watched her pour her entire heart into this play for 3 solid months. She ran her lines until they were part of her DNA. She practiced her songs in the shower, in the car, in her sleep. She glowed with a passion that lit up our entire home. I'd also been watching Mr. Harrison since he'd arrived in August, a whirlwind of slick suits and buzzwords. I'd noted his fawning over the mega donors and his dismissive air with everyone else. I'd seen the way the drama teacher, Ms. Albright, a woman of mediocre talent and boundless ambition, orbited him like a needy moon. I'd catalogued the small slights, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, the way Amelia Albright, the teacher's daughter, was suddenly getting preferential treatment. I hadn't known what story these details were telling, but my training compelled me to file them away. Now, thanks to his perfectly crafted email, I had the final chapter. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was an auditor. And Mr. Harrison's books were officially open for inspection. The incident that supposedly triggered this whole mess was laughably insignificant, a testament to their desperation. During a rehearsal last Tuesday, Lily had politely pointed out that the blocking Ms. Albright had given her was physically impossible. She couldn't exit stage left and simultaneously grab a prop from stage right in the 3 seconds allotted. Lily, ever the problem solver, suggested a simple fix. Ms. Albright's face had tightened, a flicker of fury in her eyes at being corrected by a 10-year-old. The next day, Lily was accused of being argumentative and uncooperative, a narrative quickly supported by Mr. Harrison. I requested a meeting, of course. I went in armed with logic and a collaborative spirit, assuming it was a misunderstanding. The meeting was a calculated piece of theatre. Harrison sat behind his vast mahogany desk, a king on his throne, while Albright perched beside him, a loyal courtier. They used words like holistic development and maintaining a positive ensemble environment. They spoke to me in slow, patronising tones, as if I were a simpleton incapable of grasping their complex educational philosophies. "Clara," Harrison had said, leaning forward with a pretense of sincerity, "we understand this is disappointing, but part of growing up is learning that we don't always get what we want." The sheer, unadulterated condescension of it was breathtaking. I wasn't an idiot. I was a highly trained professional with a master's degree in finance, and this man was explaining disappointment to me like I was 5. That was the moment my objective shifted from saving Lily's role to dismantling their entire corrupt little kingdom. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh legal pad and a sharpened pencil. The rage had cooled and hardened into a diamond-edged purpose. They thought they had disciplined my daughter. What they had actually done was awaken a sleeping giant. I drew a line down the centre of the page. On one side, I wrote Harrison. On the other, Albright. Beneath their names, I began to draw a map, a complex web of questions and connections. They had built their house of cards on the assumption that no one was looking closely. They were about to find out what a forensic audit truly felt like. My first call was to Sarah, my only real friend in the shark tank of PTA politics. Sarah was a lawyer, currently on a hiatus to raise her twin boys, and possessed a gloriously cynical worldview. I recounted the email and the farcical meeting, and she let out a low whistle. "Of course," she said, her voice dripping with vindication. "Harrison is a classic narcissist with a god complex. I've seen his type in divorce court 100 times. He thinks because you bake award-winning lemon bars, you're not capable of complex thought." Her validation was a balm, but her support was a weapon. "What's the plan, Clara? And how can I help?" The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Phase 1. Information. I needed data, hard and irrefutable. I started with my own records. As the PTA treasurer for the past 2 years, I had copies of every meeting's minutes, every budget proposal, every financial report. Most parents found these meetings tedious. I found them illuminating. I remembered Mr. Harrison at the fall fundraiser, preening on stage, boasting about the school's commitment to the arts. "And we've just approved the installation of a new, state-of-the-art lighting grid for our theatre," he'd announced to a round of applause. "Only the best for our Northwood students." That was my thread. An unexpected, high-cost capital expenditure. I told Sarah my starting point. "I need you to be my ears," I said. "Talk to people, the disgruntled teachers, the gossipy aides, the parents who have also been slighted. I need rumours, timelines, whispers. I'll handle the paper trail." While Sarah began her subtle campaign of social reconnaissance, I drafted my first official document. It wasn't an angry letter. It was a series of perfectly worded, legally sound, Freedom of Information Act requests, submitted to the school district, demanding all contracts, invoices and payment records related to the theatre renovation. It was dry, bureaucratic, and utterly terrifying if you had something to hide. I signed it not as Lily's mum, but as Clara Thompson, CPA. A small but significant detail. The game had begun. The documents arrived a week later, in a large manila envelope, dropped on my porch with an unceremonious thud. For a bureaucrat like Harrison, ignoring a formal information request was a bigger risk than complying. He likely assumed I wouldn't know what to do with the dense stack of papers inside. He was wrong. I spread the contents across my dining room table, the scent of toner and recycled paper filling the air like the perfume of battle. For 3 days, I lived in that data. I cross-referenced purchase order numbers with budget line items, matched invoices to payment stubs. It was mostly standard, boring stuff, until I got to the theatre lighting. The vendor was a company I'd never heard of. Prestige Theatrics, LLC. The invoice was for $250,000, a figure that was at least $100,000 more than the market rate for a system of that size. My pulse quickened. This was it. The loose brick in the wall. I pivoted to my laptop and began to dig into Prestige Theatrics. The company didn't have much of a digital footprint, which was a red flag in itself. A quick search on the state's business registry database gave me everything I needed. Prestige Theatrics LLC had been incorporated just 4 months prior. It had no public address beyond a post office box in a neighbouring state. And its registered agent, the individual legally responsible for the company, a man named David Finch. The name meant nothing to me, so I did what any modern investigator does. I turned to social media. It took me less than 5 minutes of searching Mr. Harrison's own ostentatious Instagram profile to find him. There, posted 2 months ago, was a picture of our esteemed headmaster at a summer barbecue, his arm slung chummily around a grinning man. The caption read, "A fantastic weekend with the family. So great to catch up with my brilliant brother-in-law Dave. David Finch." Dave. My breath caught in my chest. It wasn't just a loose brick, it was a stick of dynamite stuffed into the foundations. He was laundering school money through his own family. And he was so arrogant, so certain of his own untouchable status, that he'd posted the evidence himself for the entire world to see. Now that I had a lock on Harrison's financial malfeasance, I needed to understand Ms. Albright's role. Why was she so deeply complicit? Was it just to get her daughter the lead in a school play? It seemed like a petty reward for such a significant risk. My ally Sarah provided the next piece of the puzzle. She'd had coffee with a former administrative assistant from the school, a woman who had been unceremoniously downsized by Harrison 2 months ago and was simmering with resentment. The woman confirmed Sarah's suspicions. "Oh, they're definitely an item," the assistant had snipped, stirring her latte with vigour. "Mr. Harrison and Ms. Albright, they have off-site strategy meetings at least once a week. They leave separately and come back hours later. Everyone knows, but no one says anything. He controls everything. An affair. It was a grubby, predictable motive, but it explained the unwavering loyalty. Now I had to prove it. Direct evidence would be impossible to get without hiring a private investigator, a line I wasn't willing to cross. But I was a forensic accountant. I knew that people's lives, their movements, their secrets, were all written in data. I started with the school calendar and cross-referenced it with their social media. In early October, both Harrison and Albright had been absent for 3 days to attend what they separately called an educational leadership conference in Boston. A quick search revealed the conference in question had been cancelled due to low registration. Interesting. I then went deeper, using advanced search techniques on various social media platforms, looking for public posts, geotagged to Boston, during that specific 3-day window. It was a digital needle in a haystack, but after hours of scrolling through tourist photos and foodie posts, I found it. A lifestyle blogger had posted a series of photos from a chic Italian restaurant in Boston's North End. And there, in the background of a shot of her cannoli, blurred but unmistakable, were Harrison and Albright. They were seated at a small, intimate table, laughing, a bottle of wine between them. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a romantic dinner, hundreds of miles from home, all on the school's time. The personal scandal was now confirmed. With the financial fraud and the affair established, I had to connect the dots. The affair explained Ms. Albright's loyalty, but it didn't fully explain her participation in a $250,000 kickback scheme. There had to be more in it for her than a powerful boyfriend and a starring role for her daughter. I returned to the pile of documents from my information request, this time looking for Albright's signature. I found it on the Departmental Needs Assessment form, the official request that initiated the theatre renovation project. She had argued passionately in writing for the necessity of the most advanced lighting system available to unlock student potential. More importantly, I found her signature on the vendor approval form. Alongside 2 other quotes from legitimate, well-known companies, both of which were significantly cheaper, was the quote from Prestige Theatrics LLC. Ms. Albright had personally checked the box next to Harrison's brother-in-law's company and signed the bottom line, recommending it as the superior choice. She wasn't just a beneficiary of the fallout. She was an active co-conspirator. The final piece clicked into place when I examined the drama department's discretionary budget. After the lighting system was approved, Mr. Harrison had authorized a special one-time grant of $50,000 to the drama department for curriculum and resource enrichment. Ms. Albright, as department head, had sole authority over how that money was spent. It was her cut. A fat, $50,000 reward for her loyalty and her signature, laundered through the school's own budget. It was a tidy, self-contained loop of corruption. Harrison gets his kickback through his brother-in-law, Albright gets her payoff disguised as a grant, and her daughter gets the spotlight. And the only thing it cost them was my daughter's role and $250,000 of the school's money. The web wasn't just a web, it was a blueprint, and I had a copy. The week before the winter performance was thick with a cloying, festive tension. The school halls were draped in tinsel and paper snowflakes, a cheerful facade for the toxic rot I knew was spreading beneath the surface. My daughter Lily was quiet, the light in her eyes dimmed. She was putting on a brave face, but I could feel her hurt like a physical ache in my own chest. That ache was my fuel. My investigation was complete. I had compiled everything into 2 identical dossiers. One was a password-protected, encrypted file on a USB stick. The other was a meticulously organized binder with every document, every screenshot, and every financial statement printed, annotated, and protected in a plastic sleeve. It was a work of art, a symphony of their downfall. My plan was no longer just about exposing them. It was about creating a moment of pure, inescapable accountability. Leaking it to the press or the school district was an option, but it was messy. It lacked poetry. Harrison and Albright thrived on performance and public perception, so I would give them one. I would make them the stars of their own tragedy on the grandest stage they had, the annual Northwood Gala and fundraiser. The gala was the night before the play, a glittering affair where Harrison would hold court, charming millions of dollars out of the pockets of wealthy parents who trusted him implicitly. It was his night to shine. And I was going to be the stagehand who brought the entire set crashing down around him. As the PTA treasurer, I was already on the schedule to give a brief financial report. It was usually a dry 5-minute affair that most people ignored. This year, it would be the main event. I spent 2 days preparing my presentation, a slideshow that started with bake sale profits and ended in professional ruin. I timed every slide, rehearsed every line, my voice calm and informative, the very picture of a competent, slight boring treasurer. They would never see it coming. The ballroom of the downtown hotel was a sea of sequins and tuxedos. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden light on the assembled parents, a who's who of the city's elite. Mr. Harrison was in his element, gliding through the crowd with a glass of champagne, his laughter booming, his hand-clasping shoulders. Ms. Albright was a shimmering shadow at his side, her dress a shade too dramatic, her smile a little too bright. They were the king and queen of a kingdom built on lies, and tonight was their coronation. I, in a simple but elegant black dress, felt like an assassin at a state dinner. I was invisible, just another face in the crowd, and that was my greatest advantage. Sarah found me by the silent auction tables. "You okay?" she whispered, her eyes scanning the room. "You look terrifyingly calm." I gave her a small smile. "I'm not calm," I said. "I'm focused." My first target was Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the school board. He was a decent but overworked man, a senior partner at a major law firm who delegated the school's day-to-day oversight entirely to Harrison. I intercepted him near the bar. "Mr. Henderson," I said warmly. "Clara Thompson, it's so good to see you." He smiled, shaking my hand. "Clara, the miracle worker with the budget. I hear you've raised record amounts this year." "We're trying," I said with practiced modesty. "But you know, the more we raise, the more we spend." I was just going over the final numbers for my report tonight, and I got stuck on the theatre renovation. The final invoice seemed, well, significantly higher than the initial projections. I must have misplaced a change order form. I'm sure it's just my mistake. I watched his face closely. A tiny frown line appeared between his brows. He was a lawyer. Unexpected and unexplained costs were a red flag to him. Higher? He asked. By how much? Oh, probably nothing, I said, waving a dismissive hand. I'll get to the bottom of it. Enjoy your evening. I walked away, leaving the seed of doubt planted in the most fertile ground possible. The overture had begun. After the dinner plates were cleared and the dessert was served, Mr. Harrison took to the stage for his main address. He was a master showman, weaving a narrative of excellence and ambition that had the parents ready to pull out their checkbooks. He was charming, funny, and utterly fraudulent. Finally, he wound down. And none of our financial success would be possible without the tireless work of our PTA, led by our incredible treasurer, Clara Thompson. Let's have a round of applause for Clara, who keeps us all on the straight and narrow with the bake sale funds. The room offered a polite spattering of applause. Harrison gave me a wink from the stage, a gesture of such profound condescension it nearly made me laugh. I walked to the podium, my heels clicking softly on the polished stage. The USB stick felt cool and solid in my hand. I inserted it into the laptop, my own presentation file appearing on the screen. I smiled out at the 200 faces looking back at me. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, I began, my voice even and clear. And thank you, parents, for your incredible generosity this year. The first slide appeared on the giant screen behind me, a colourful pie chart showing PTA fundraising sources. I spent exactly 60 seconds talking about wrapping paper sales and the Halloween carnival. I could see Harrison relaxing, smiling, thinking this was all going according to plan. Then I pivoted. And it's so rewarding to see that money being put to good use for our students. Which brings me to the school's single largest capital expenditure this fiscal year, the wonderful new equipment for our theatre. The slide changed. The pie chart was gone, replaced by a clean white background with bold black text. Theatre renovation. A financial deep dive. Harrison's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. The show was about to begin. As part of our commitment to fiscal transparency, I continued, my tone still placidly professional, I wanted to provide a brief breakdown of this significant $250,000 investment. The next slide showed a high-resolution scan of the invoice from Prestige Theatrics, LLC. I let it hang there for a moment. Then with a click, 2 more columns appeared beside it. Quotes from 2 other highly reputable theatrical supply companies. One was for $140,000, the other for $165,000. A low murmur rippled through the audience. People were leaning forward in their seats. As you can see, the quote from Prestige Theatrics was substantially higher than its competitors, I stated, as if observing a curious fact. Naturally, as treasurer, I felt it was my fiduciary duty to learn more about this new vendor we were entrusting with such a large sum. The next slide was a screenshot from the state's business registry. Prestige Theatrics was founded just 4 months ago. The murmuring grew louder. I saw the board chairman, Mr. Henderson, staring intently at the screen, his folksy demeanour gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a litigator. It has no website, no listed phone number, and is registered to a post office box. Click. The next slide showed the name of the registered agent, David Finch. Click. The final slide in this sequence was the crown jewel, the photo from Mr. Harrison's own Instagram feed. Him, beaming, his arm around a man I now introduced. And this is the company's sole registered agent, Mr. David Finch, pictured here with his brother-in-law, our very own headmaster, Mr. Harrison. The room fell into a sudden, shocked silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. I paused, turned my head slightly, and looked directly at Mr. Harrison. The colour had completely drained from his face. His skin was a pasty, clammy grey, his mouth slightly agape. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, the ghost of his own career. I didn't give him a moment to recover. I turned back to the audience, my voice a blade wrapped in velvet. "Of course," I said. "A purchase of this magnitude isn't made in a vacuum. It requires departmental oversight and approval to ensure our academic leaders are confident in the investment." With a click, the next slide appeared, displaying the signed vendor approval form. Ms. Albright's flamboyant signature was clearly visible in the approved box. Her head snapped toward the screen, her eyes wide with panic. "As you can see, Ms. Albright, the head of our drama department, personally selected Prestige Theatrics over the more established, more affordable options." I let that sink in. And her dedication was rewarded. Immediately following this approval, Mr. Harrison authorized a special $50,000 discretionary grant to the drama department for curriculum enrichment. The next slide was the most damning yet. A flowchart I had created, showing the transfer of funds from the school's general account into the special grant fund, and then a series of payments from that fund to a consulting company I had traced back to Ms. Albright herself. It was a clear, undeniable diagram of a kickback. A wave of angry muttering washed over the ballroom. But I wasn't finished. I had to salt the earth. This level of professional dedication between a headmaster and a department head is truly something to behold, I said, my voice dropping slightly. It speaks to a relationship built on deep, personal trust. Click. The final image filled the screen. It was the blurry but damning photo from the Boston restaurant. Harrison and Albright, wine glasses touching, intimately close, happy and carefree on their fake conference trip. A collective gasp, sharp and loud, echoed through the room. It was done. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't accused. I had simply presented the facts. And the facts had convicted them. The immediate aftermath was pure, unadulterated chaos. Mr. Harrison, his face a grotesque mask of shock and fury, stumbled toward the podium, grabbing the microphone. "This is an outrage! A slanderous attack!" he sputtered, his voice cracking. But his words were drowned out by the angry shouts of parents rising from their seats. Ms. Albright, letting out a choked sob, turned and fled the ballroom, her shimmering dress a pathetic beacon of her disgrace. All eyes were on Harrison, who stood frozen in the spotlight, a cornered animal. It was Mr. Henderson, the board chairman, who restored order. He strode onto the stage, his face a thundercloud of controlled rage, and took the microphone from Harrison's trembling hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice booming with authority, his eyes finding mine in the crowd with a look of grim respect. He then turned to the audience. "In light of this presentation, I am announcing the immediate and indefinite suspension of both Mr. Harrison and Ms. Albright, pending a full, independent forensic investigation. The board will be meeting tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. sharp." He then looked directly at Harrison. "Security will escort you from the premises." I didn't stay to watch the final humiliation. My work was done. As Harrison was flanked by two stern-faced hotel security guards, I calmly walked to the back of the room where Sarah was waiting, her face split by a triumphant grin. She handed me a flute of champagne. "Clara Thompson," she said, raising her glass. "The most glorious treasurer's report in the history of humankind." We clinked glasses, the clean, sharp sound a perfect counterpoint to the din of a collapsing regime. Over Sarah's shoulder I watched Harrison, no longer a king but a frantic, pleading man, trying to reason with parents who were now turning their backs on him in disgust. He had underestimated me. He thought I was just a mother. He learned, far too late, that a mother's love, when weaponized by a forensic accountant's mind, is the most destructive force on Earth. The following day, the Northwood preparatory community imploded. Emails flew, phones rang off the hook, and a special emergency board meeting was held. The investigation, led by a team of external auditors hired by Mr. Henderson, was swift and brutal. Within a week, they had not only confirmed every single one of my findings, but had also uncovered a host of other petty grafts and abuses of power Harrison had committed during his short, disastrous tenure. He and Ms. Albright were formally terminated. The school district, facing a massive scandal, announced they would be pursuing criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. My favourite part was the schadenfreude. Harrison, in a desperate attempt to control the narrative, sent a long, rambling email to the entire parent body, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive personal vendetta. The response was a deafening digital silence. His power, built on a foundation of charisma and fear, had vanished overnight. Ms. Albright, true to her archetype, immediately turned on him, hiring her own lawyer and attempting to position herself as a naive pawn in his larger scheme. Her loyalty, it turned out, was as flimsy as her character. The interim headmistress appointed by the board was a woman named Mrs. Gable, a veteran educator with a no-nonsense demeanour and kind eyes. One of her first acts was to call me personally. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice warm and sincere, "I have reviewed your daughter's file and the circumstances of her removal from the school play. On behalf of the school, I offer you and Lily our most profound apologies. This was an injustice, and we are going to make it right." The winter performance was officially postponed for 2 weeks. When it was rescheduled, the cast list was restored to its original state. Lily was the lead once more. Watching her on that stage, under the new, legally procured lights, was a victory purer than any revenge. Her voice filled the auditorium, clear and strong, and the light that had been dimmed in her eyes now shone with the brilliance of a supernova. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about restoration. 6 months passed. The seasons turned, and the scandal at Northwood Preparatory slowly faded from a raging fire to a cautionary tale whispered in other school districts. Under Mrs. Gable's steady leadership, the school began to heal. The culture of fear was replaced by one of transparency and collaboration. The $250,000, most of which was recovered from Harrison through legal action, was used to fund scholarships for underprivileged students, a decision made by the newly empowered parent board. I had quietly resigned as PTA treasurer. My work there was done. The books were balanced in more ways than one. I went back to being Lily's mum, to packing lunches and driving to soccer practice, but something within me had irrevocably shifted. The story of the gala, however, had taken on a life of its own. It became a local legend. The quiet PTA mum, who single-handedly brought down a corrupt administration with a PowerPoint presentation. One afternoon, I received a call from a woman who introduced herself as the head of a citywide educational advocacy group. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "I've heard about what you did at Northwood. It was extraordinary. We have parents from a dozen other schools dealing with stonewalling, with questionable financial practices, with administrations that refuse to be held accountable. They don't have your skills. They need a champion." She asked if I would consider joining their board, perhaps leading a new financial oversight committee. I was hesitant at first. That part of my life, the world of numbers and confrontation, felt like a suit I had hung in the back of the closet. But then I thought of Lily, and of all the other Lilies, whose light might be dimmed by the arrogance of men like Harrison. I thought about the feeling of cold, clear purpose at my kitchen table that night. I hadn't just exposed a fraud. I had rediscovered a part of myself. I said yes. 2 years later, I stood at a podium once again. This time, it wasn't a hotel ballroom, but the main stage of a national education conference in Washington, D.C. The small advocacy group I had joined was now a thriving non-profit organisation that I had built from the ground up. We were the Educational Accountability Initiative, and I was its founder and executive director. We had a staff of 10, including 2 full-time lawyers and a forensic accountant I'd trained myself. We provided pro bono services to parents and teachers, empowering them with the tools to demand transparency from their school systems. We had become a recognised and respected force for change. My life was unrecognisable from what it had been. I was no longer just Clara Thompson, Lily's mum. I was a respected advocate, a strategist, a voice for those who were systematically ignored. My days were filled with purpose, with the complex, satisfying work of untangling knots and speaking truth to power. I was in the middle of my keynote address, telling the story of Northwood, not as a tale of revenge, but as a case study in the power of data and the importance of parental engagement. As I looked out at the audience of educators, administrators and parents, I saw Lily in the front row, now a confident middle schooler, sitting next to Sarah. She was looking at me with an expression of such pride it nearly took my breath away. I concluded my speech with the lesson I had learned through it all. There will always be those in positions of authority who confuse silence with acquiescence and kindness with weakness, I said, my voice ringing with the clarity of hard-won experience. They operate under the delusion that they are the only ones smart enough to understand the game. But they consistently make one fatal error. They underestimate the quiet, observant woman in the room. And that, I assure you, is the most dangerous, most ruinous mistake they will ever make. The applause was deafening. It was the sound of a triumphant reinvention,